Welcome into the Steelers Talk live show here on a Tuesday on Wild Card Week. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. Thank you guys so much for joining me here on a Tuesday. It's our first of two live shows this week. We'll be going live again on Thursday, but today there's a major shakeup happening in the AFC North that we'll talk about here in just a moment. But on today's show, Tomlin Tuesday news and rumors. The head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers took the podium today. Not a whole lot of injury updates today, so honestly, it's more about the shakeup currently happening in the AFC North in our first segment today. Then, are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to keep defensive coordinator Teryl Austin and give him another contract this offseason with the Steelers defense playing better to finish out the 2025 campaign? It's definitely a possibility. Then we'll finish up today's show with our third segment of the day, which is why I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers can go on a run in the AFC playoffs this year and have the deepest run in the playoffs since at least 2016 when this team made the AFC Championship game. Now get the party started for me down there in the comment section. Type those me's in the chat. Who's all here? Let me know. We got over 300 people in the chat room already. We got Mike Nintendo Master. We got Trumper 2025. We've got who else? Frankenstein. Lil Slush is here. What's up, Lil Slush? It's been a while, my friend. Czar Craig is here. Voxy. Kermit is my god. My lovely fiance Cassie Voth is here. We've got Nick, Rodolfo, Craig, Bryson, Tristan, Tim, Voxy, Richard. We've got George Pickensburg. We've got Joshua. We got Nick. We've got James. We've got The Game. We got Bryson. We've got Tink. We got Damian Roy in the chat. What's up, Damian? Good to see you, man. We've got who else? We got Cole, Bryson, Moises, Jacob, Fly, Mike Wolf. We've got a good crew of Steelers fans ready to talk some Steelers football with us today. But Ponzi, we got a big shakeup happening in the AFC North as we currently speak, as the second longest tenured head coach in the NFL, John Harbaugh, has been fired by the Baltimore Ravens following the AFC North championship game loss to our Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday night. And this is obviously a huge piece of news. I mean, this is a head coach that has been in Baltimore for 18 years, nearly 2 decades, and now he and the team and the Baltimore Ravens are parting ways at this point. And Baltimore, for the first time, in a very long time now, is going to have a new head coach. Of course, Mike Tomlin and John Harbaugh just finished their 40th meeting in game versus each other as head coaches of their respective franchises, and just doesn't matter at this point, man. Mike Tomlin just outlasts everybody in this division. But the Cleveland Browns have also fired their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, former 2-time NFL Coach of the Year, is now coaching free agent as well. And Stefanski and Harbaugh are expected to be some of the most highly sought-after head coaching candidates in the head coaching market this season. So look for those two guys to get head coaching jobs somewhere during the offseason here. And then the Cincinnati Bengals are actually keeping their head coach, Zach Taylor, for another season. Apparently, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, the leadership there in that Bengals locker room really advocated to keep Zach Taylor. So he will be kept in place for at least one more year. My guess is the Bengals kind of chalked up this season to Joe Burrow getting injured, and there wasn't really much that Zach could have done. So he's going to get at least one more opportunity. And listen, guys, I think, if I could have picked what I wanted to have happened for the AFC North coaching cycle this year, this is exactly the way that I would set it up if I were a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and I am, where I would get rid of John Harbaugh, Super Bowl winning head coach, 18-year coaching veteran, get him out of Baltimore, let them hire somebody that stinks. Then, of course, get the 2-time coach of the year out of Cleveland. That's certainly going to stabilize that organization. And then, keep Zach Taylor, who I think is a pretty milquetoast, boring head coach that I think limits what the Cincinnati Bengals are capable of doing with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I don't really fear the Bengals when Zach Taylor is their head coach. So this couldn't have worked out any better, at least in terms of my preferences, Ponzi, but kind of a crazy day in the National Football League. Harbaugh out, the Ravens, with Lamar Jackson, immediately become the number one destination for coaching candidates across the National Football League. And then the Browns will also be looking for a new head coach as well.
I think, obviously, like with the Ravens, I think the main candidate should be Brian Flores. I think, that he'd be a great fit for them. Obviously, we don't want that to happen, but, Brian Flores should be a shoo-in for that job. And if he wants it, that's a very desirable job.
Yeah, Flores is one name that's being thrown out there. A name that's really being thrown out there right now is Jesse Minter. But if I'm the Ravens, I'm moving off of Harbaugh and I'm moving off of that family and that regime. Why am I bringing in another Harbaugh guy? Like I would, if I were the Ravens, I would want Brian Flores. Brian Flores would be one of my top guys for the Steelers job if they move off of Mike Tomlin, which doesn't seem like that's what they're going to do. They're going to keep Mike Tomlin, but it's just insane to me, Ponzi, that even somebody that was a head coach for an NFL football team 18 years, Mike Tomlin even outlasted that head coach in this division. So Mike Tomlin just wins, man. He just, he is the stabilizing force in this division. No matter how many times Cleveland changes head coach or Baltimore changes head coach or the Bengals change head coaches, the stabilizing force and the thing that never changes that the Pittsburgh Steelers have Mike Tomlin as the head coach of the black and gold. And it does appear that he will at least have one more season here in Pittsburgh, and he will round it out with at least 20 seasons as the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers after he concludes the 2026 season. That is if he comes back next year. But I think at this point, Ponzi, everyone is expecting Tomlin to be back at this point after winning the division championship this year. But who you guys got this weekend, man? It's going to be a fun matchup here. The Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the Houston Texans. It's a warm weather football team coming to a colder Pittsburgh. Now, it's supposed to be like pretty dry, and it's supposed to be in like the low 30s. So it's not going to be like freezing, but it is a lot colder than what CJ Stroud and the Texans are used to. So I think that gives maybe a slight advantage to Pittsburgh. But you get DK Metcalf back. This defense has been playing better as of late. And you can make an argument that Pittsburgh's style of offense, right, getting the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands quickly, is kind of built to go up against a team like the Houston Texans that have not one but two really good pass rushers, arguably two of the top 10 pass rushers in the game today, in Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. If you have a quarterback that gets the ball out super fast, then that could be a recipe for success against a team like Houston that really relies on pressure, on getting the quarterback on the ground, getting teams into third and long situations. I don't know, man. I just have a weirdly good feeling about this football game this week, Ponzi.
I really think like the biggest factor for this weekend's game, or this week's Monday, the game is going to be the Steelers defense and the Texans offense. That offense has been sputtery at times, but if they could really sink in, that could pose a problem, especially with time of possession. But I really think that the Steelers defense has played a lot better than they have looked. Obviously, there's miscommunications against the Ravens, but I really do have faith in the Steelers defense to figure it out in time for this Texans matchup. Because CJ Stroud, he's been mediocre at best sometimes this season. He really does sputter. He does really, fail at times, and he has really shown that he can, push the ball down the field, but it's just really inconsistent. So I really think that if the Steelers defense can step up and limit the Texans offense, I think that it's just going to be a matter of time for that defense could just be on the field constantly.
Yeah, I think that, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think it's a pretty decent matchup for them. So, with a warm weather team coming to our building, coming off of that awesome win versus the Baltimore Ravens last week, the Houston Texans are winners of 9 straight, and they've won games with Davis Mills at quarterback. That is, that's a team that's a really good ball club with a really good defense. So we're going to have our work cut out for us. It's not going to be an easy game or anything like that, but I do think that the Steelers' chances of winning this playoff game is higher than any playoff game they've played since probably when they played Cleveland at home back in 2020. And even then, I might give the Steelers a better odds in this game because Aaron Rodgers is playing better at this point in the season than Big Ben was playing at that point in that season. So I'm looking forward to Monday night for sure. We'll have another live show this week on Thursday to get you guys ready for that matchup. But we'll catch up on some super chats here before we get into our first segment of the day, starting with Matthew Rusek, who says, will the Steelers restructure TJ Watt's contract? It's certainly possible. Obviously there's a lot of money on that thing, and if you feel like you need to get some more cap space, that's always going to be an option this early into the deal. Now, something that I will say is that this roster is already pretty set for 2026. There's not that many big, holes that you need to fill on the roster next year. Most of the veterans are under contract and all that different stuff. So, and you've got like $65+ million in cap space next year. So I'm not even sure if the restructure is going to be needed, but that's always an option at Omar Khan's disposal if they need to get more money. I would say it's probably more of a possibility if they have to spend money on a quarterback, like if Aaron Rodgers retires and you have to spend like $25 to $30 million a year on Malik Willis or something like that, then that might be something where you think about some restructures here, but obviously, you have to pay the piper at some point, and if you can afford to take a little bit of a heavier cap hit on TJ Watt next year, maybe that's something that you would want to do so that you don't have to pay that money against the cap in future seasons. All right, man. Well, that's the only super chat that has come in to this point, but we are going to be getting into our first segment of the day, News and Rumors on Tomlin Tuesday. Also, make sure you guys stick around because we'll do a spotlight video on defensive coordinator Terrell Austin and whether or not the Steelers should keep him on as DC. And then we'll go into our final segment of the day, which is my reasoning for why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers can go on a run in the NFL playoffs this year. So it's going to be a fun show here, guys. Lots of great stuff to talk about. So first up here, Tomlin Tuesday, News and Rumors. Let's get into it. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. There is currently an AFC North coaching shakeup that is now underway. We're going to be breaking down the Ravens firing their head coach, John Harbaugh, and the Browns firing their head coach, Kevin Stefanski, at the top of today's show and what that means for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then we'll get into a report that is now linking Aaron Rodgers to the Minnesota Vikings in 2026. Could he leave Pittsburgh to join forces with Kevin O'Connell? I'll discuss that rumor here coming up in a little bit, and then make sure you guys stick around because I'll finish up today's show by talking about Colin Cowherd's latest lunacy when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers and why Pittsburgh ended up winning the AFC North here in 2025. But before we get into the content today, yesterday we put out our preview for Texans versus Steelers, and I put out a call for our sub battle. Well, guess what? So did Texans, and Jeremy Chuggs has been slandering my name on his channel, and because of that, Texans fans are really riled up. They've gotten 3 more new subscribers than us already this week. Both fan bases are really riled up. We added 288 new subscribers already, so we're just 3 new subscribers behind the Texans. So if you haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, you watch our channel, I'd greatly appreciate it if you click that thumbs up icon so we can beat Jeremy Chuggs. This is a tweet that he put out yesterday. He says, "My coworker, Jack Sperry, is delusional. He truly believes the Steelers are going to beat the Texans this week, ... I broke down why him and Steelers fans reasons of why they'll win are ridiculous. So if you guys want to beat Jeremy Chuggs this week, make sure you guys click that subscribe button. Let's bury these fools and show them that Steelers Nation is undefeated. All right, so now let's get into the big shakeup that is happening in the AFC North. Obviously, it's been a disappointing year for most of the teams in the AFC North this year, especially the Baltimore Ravens, who were preseason Super Bowl favorites, and most people projected the Steelers to be either third or fourth in the division heading into the year. Of course, they end up being crowned champions, but today the Baltimore Ravens have decided to fire their 18-year, tenured head coach, John Harbaugh, creating an opening in Baltimore at the head coaching position in nearly 2 decades. Of course, Harbaugh was the second longest tenured head coach in the NFL. He just finished his 40th matchup versus Mike Tomlin and the Pittsburgh Steelers, and maybe, who knows, if Tyler Lute makes that kick, we might be talking about a different story here. Maybe we would be on the receiving end here and Tomlin would be the one that's getting fired. Probably not, but, the Baltimore Ravens decided to pull this trigger, and, they're going to have a head coach there in Baltimore, a new one, for the first time in a long time, and Harbaugh is expected to be the number 1 head coaching candidate across the National Football League. It sounds like there's a lot of things connecting him to the New York Giants, but then also the Cleveland Browns have fired their head coach, Kevin Stefanski. The 2-time coach of the year is out in Cleveland, and there will be a new head coach to usher in the next era of Cleveland Brown football, likely with Shadur Sanders and Deshaun Watson coming back into the fold. there in 2026. Honestly, don't love that job in Cleveland because I don't love the quarterbacks that, Andrew Berry, their GM, is going to want to keep on the roster next year. And frankly, I don't think getting rid of a 2-time Coach of the Year is going to stabilize that organization. I think the Browns are just going to get worse before it gets better, which is, just the way it works in Cleveland. But then the Cincinnati Bengals are actually keeping their head coach, Zach Taylor, after multiple disappointing seasons in a row. The Brown family has decided to keep Zach Taylor around. Apparently Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, the leadership there in the Bengals locker room decided to really, push to keep Taylor. And there was some injuries this year, specifically to Joe Burrow, that really derailed their season early on. And who knows, where the Bengals would be right now if, Burrow stayed healthy. But their defense is once again terrible. It was one of the worst, if not the worst defenses in the National Football League. And as a Steelers fan, man, I am thrilled that the Bengals decided to keep him on their team. And listen, man, my takeaway from all this is that, Mike Tomlin is that stabilizing force in this division. No matter what happens in this division, different quarterbacks, different head coaches with all these different teams, the one thing that never changes is Mike Tomlin is the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he always finds a way to keep his job, get this team to 10-7 or better, and then make the playoffs, and this year delivering an AFC North championship. So Mike Tomlin continues to be the steady presence in this division, and is a big reason why the Steelers, are never in the basement of the AFC North and are the stabilizing force and the kings of this division. But for me, guys, this couldn't be better for Pittsburgh because, you're getting rid of two pretty darn good coaches within this division. Stefanski's a 2-time Coach of the Year. Harbaugh is a pretty darn good coach in his own right. And now the Browns and Ravens are going to be bringing in new people that are unknown and might not be quite as good. So, Harbaugh's Super Bowl champion. So, there's definitely a big shakeup happening in the AFC North right now. It's going to be interesting to see what those two teams decide to do at head coach this offseason. But coming up here on Steelers Talk is Aaron Rodgers on his way to Minnesota here in 2026. There's a new rumor indicating that Rodgers may be interested in going to Minnesota, and Minnesota might be interested in bringing the then 43-year-old quarterback in for one final season. But before we get into the rest of today's show, guys, let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks. And it is officially the new year here, guys. And in my opinion, this is the best time of the year for watching sports, whether it's bowl games or playoff games, whether it be in collegiate or professional football. Basketball and hockey season is now in full swing as well. It's all happening all at once. It's all happening right now. And while all that action is going on, there's one place where it feels good to be right. Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super simple to play. You just pick more than or less than on at least 2 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. My favorite feature about Prize Picks is that how you play is up to you. If you want a little bit more flexibility, you can choose the flex play, where you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you're feeling really strong about your lineup and want a bigger payout, you can go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test, make some money. That is, if you know ball. You guys can take a look here at my Prize Picks projection for Monday Night Football wild card weekend here between the Texans and Steelers. I'm taking the less on passing yards for C.J. Stroud, the more on receptions for Kenny Gainwell, and the more on receiving yards for Pat Freiermuth. You guys can download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now, here we go again, Steelers Nation, with the Minnesota Vikings Aaron Rodgers new rumors, and especially from The Athletic in particular. And instead of Diana Rossini, it's Jeff Howe from The Athletic saying that the Vikings may pursue Aaron Rodgers this offseason, despite the fact that they have a young quarterback that they spent a top 10 draft pick on just a couple years ago in J.J. McCarthy, who didn't have the best season this year. This is what Howe had to say about the connection between Rodgers and the Vikings. He says Rodgers and the Vikings were flirting from across the room last offseason, so there could be some consideration of rekindling those flames, especially if the Vikings want to pause or even halt the J.J. McCarthy experiment. Now, first of all, I don't necessarily think Minnesota was flirting with Rodgers last year. I think a lot of people wanted Rodgers to go to Minnesota because, they had a Super Bowl ready roster and it would have paralleled Brett Favre's career, and, he's friends with Kevin O'Connell, so they made that connection. But according to Rodgers himself, he said it this offseason that, he's friends with Kevin O'Connell, so he would have some conversations with him, but there was no real talks about him going to Minnesota. And, the Vikings were very clear all offseason as well. We're going with J.J. McCarthy. Now, Diana Rossini and Colin Cowherd and all these people just threw speculation against the wall because they wanted it to happen. They wanted to have a story to talk about. But, according to Aaron Rodgers himself, there really wasn't much there, and there wasn't a whole lot of interest on the part of the Minnesota Vikings. However, I do think Aaron potentially had some interest in going to Minnesota last offseason, all right? They did have, on paper, a really good roster heading into the offseason. He is good friends with Kevin O'Connell. They do play in the NFC North, where he would get to play the Bears twice and the Packers twice. That would be definitely an interesting situation, and I think, he would have loved to go to L.A. To play for the Rams and Sean McVay. I think he would have liked to play in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell. But, apparently that just wasn't something Minnesota was interested in this offseason, and Rodgers ends up, falling in love with Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, and he ends up signing here, and the rest is history. But if Minnesota does come calling here this offseason, like apparently they didn't last year, could Rodgers pick up that phone? Because I think if this offseason he had a choice between Minnesota and Pittsburgh, and those two teams were equally interested in Rodgers, I think he probably picks Minnesota. All right, but Minnesota wasn't interested in him, so he ends up coming to Pittsburgh. If the same choice is there in front of him this year, is he going to pick Minnesota over Pittsburgh again, or is he going to come back to Pittsburgh? For me, I think anything's possible, but I think now that Aaron is here in Pittsburgh and he's embedded in this organization and in this locker room, my guess is if he returns in 2026, and it sounds like he's certainly maybe leaning that direction, I think he would return to Pittsburgh before going to another new organization, his third team in 3 years, at 43 years old, and go play for the Minnesota Vikings. And there's a few reasons for that. The first reason is he has a special connection with head coach Mike Tomlin, and Rodgers has said this a number of times, from his first, media availability here in Pittsburgh to, his last press conference after we won the AFC North Championship last Sunday. Whenever he's asked, why did you come to Pittsburgh? I came here because of Mike Tomlin, and he has been so complimentary of Coach T all season long. I don't know if that's a relationship where, Rodgers is going to be like, well, Kevin O'Connell's calling me now. Sorry, Mike. See you later. I just don't think that, Aaron is the type of guy to do that. I think that he's somebody that really cherishes his relationships with people. I think he really cherishes his relationship with Coach T in particular. So I think he feels a little bit of loyalty to the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin. Second of all, I think a second year of continuity in this offense, is important to him. And he's talked about this in the past, how, in the first year of an offense, you're just getting to know the offense and the players and building chemistry. And then the second year is really the year where you can take off. This is what Rodgers had to say about second year continuity and why he's thinking about what it could look like in a second year here in Pittsburgh. He says, anytime you're in a first year offense, there's always some growing pains in the offense. So it's like you feel like if you had another year, what could you do? I look at 2019, the first year with Matt LaFleur, and the way I played in 2019, and then kind of the adjustments we made in the offseason, and then the way I played in 2020, which was just kind of in a whole other level. I think a lot of that is just familiarity with the offense and the guys. And we've done the best we could with our conversations and our meeting time in Pittsburgh this year, outside the facility, and our meeting time and inside the facility. Obviously, the more years you get in a system with the same guys, the more continuity you have, the better you feel you can play. So if Rodgers goes to Minnesota, obviously he has to build up that connection and that chemistry and that continuity in one season again, whereas in Pittsburgh, he'd be in the same offense with the same coordinator, with a lot of the same weapons and the pieces and the O-line and all that different stuff. And also just in terms of style and what KOC, the head coach there in Minnesota, likes to do, he likes to run a pure progression offense, lots of under center. That is not an Aaron Rodgers friendly offense. Rodgers likes to be in shotgun. He likes to have a lot of freedom at the line of scrimmage and to call audibles and see things in the defense. But like KOC wants a quarterback to go up there, read the defense post snap and just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rodgers wants to be more of a pre-snap processor, whereas KOC wants his quarterbacks to be post-snap processors. So there's a little bit of a rift there. So if he goes to Minnesota, what exactly is the offense going to look like? But now, in terms of what we can expect from Rodgers in terms of free agency next year, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler says that Pittsburgh may have to wait, quote-unquote, months for an answer as to whether or not Rodgers wants to play in 2026. And, that bears the question, do the Pittsburgh Steelers really want to do this again and wait as long as they waited this year to sign Aaron Rodgers? This is what Fowler had to say this week. He says, if the Steelers fail to make the playoffs, does Rodgers say, I'm going to go? We do shows all offseason, so we know that we're not going to get clarity right after the game on what Aaron Rodgers is going to do. It's going to be months probably, so we'll see what happens. Now, I really don't know if this is the case. I feel like people assume because last year Aaron Rodgers took a long time to quote-unquote decide to sign with the Steelers that he's going to do it again. And do we really know that for sure? I think last offseason was kind of a unique circumstance for Aaron Rodgers in his personal life. And I think everybody just kind of assumes that, Rodgers purposefully, held the Steelers on the line for multiple months when in reality, he was dealing with, multiple people in his life that were dealing with cancer and they were fighting that really deadly disease, and he didn't want to commit to a football team if it meant that him taking care of his people would bleed into the season and he wasn't going to be able to fully commit to the team. I think he decided to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers actually pretty early on, probably right after he visited Pittsburgh, just a couple weeks into free agency. I think he decided right there and right then, if I'm playing this year, it's going to be for Pittsburgh, but I got to make sure my people start fighting off this disease and you get some positive signs before I really buy in and I really sign that dotted line and I make that commitment. And that's why it took as long as it did. Going into this offseason, though, hopefully, anyways, he's not going to have to deal with those same things and he's not going to have to take care of his people the same way he did last offseason. And honestly, man, I bet he makes a decision much faster this offseason, all right? I think we'll probably have an answer on Aaron Rodgers of whether or not he's going to come back and play for the Steelers or whether he is going to retire by free agency. All right, I think we'll have that answer by the time that free agency opens. We're not going to have to wait months. We're not going to have to wait, until June or, right before mandatory minicamp. I don't think that's the case. I think we're going to get an answer from Aaron Rodgers a lot sooner than people think. And my guess is he will come back in 2026. I think, honestly, right now, the only way that I could see, the chances of Rodgers retiring being greater than him coming back is if the Steelers win the Super Bowl. Because if the Steelers win the Super Bowl and Santa Clara, where, the area where he grew up in the 49ers stadium, and, who knows who they'd be playing. Maybe they play the Packers, maybe they play the Bears. Who knows what the matchup would look like. If we win the Super Bowl this year, I think Rodgers is done, okay? But if we come up short, this is a team that made the playoffs this year in his first year, and we already know Rodgers is curious as to what things will look like in a potential second year here in Pittsburgh. So I think, double-digit win season in year one, maybe we can get to 12 or 13 wins in year two. I think that will be his thinking. Plus, it's Cam Hayward's final year of his career next year. I think Cam's going to want Rodgers to come back. Unless Rodgers gets massively injured or we win the Super Bowl, I think Rodgers likely is back with the Steelers next year. So predict it for me down there in the comments section. Will Aaron Rodgers be back on the Steelers next season? Simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. I think he will be. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down there in the comments. We'll finish up today's News and Rumors edition of Steelers Talk by talking about Colin Cowherd, our favorite clown that knows nothing about the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he says and he claims Aaron Rodgers was the one that carried the Pittsburgh Steelers to a division title in 2025, saying that he's the only thing the Steelers do well. In fact, Colin even said that Aaron Rodgers should win Comeback Player of the Year this year. Now, with the old rules of Comeback Player of the Year, I would agree. He's had a pretty darn good season after everyone kind of, casted him away. But with the new rules, you have to be coming off an injury, and Rodgers played all 17 games with the Jets last year, so he's not eligible to win the award. But this is what Colin Cowherd had to say about Rodgers and how he apparently carried the Steelers this year. He said, all year long on Pittsburgh, I kept going back to this well. I kept saying they don't do anything I like except Aaron Rodgers. At 42 years old, was the only thing every Sunday I was like, yeah, I trust Aaron. He hasn't thrown a pick since what, November? And the Steelers have a lead versus Baltimore. They blow two coverages. Zay Flowers Bowers is open multiple times, allowing 7.5 yards per play. Lamar Jackson, fourth quarter, up and down the field. And the other thing is, nobody gets open with the Steelers. You notice this? Aaron Rodgers' second half of the season with no DK Metcalf the last 2 weeks, 73% completion percentage, passer rating well over 100. PFF has the Steelers receiving core at number 29. That was rated with the season with DK Metcalf. It's 32nd without him. And here's Aaron, who doesn't run much anymore in a dysfunctional offense that really hasn't run the ball consistently for 7 years, an offensive line that has been okay and inconsistent for 7 years in pass protection, and he pulls it all together. Now, in terms of Colin and, saying that Aaron is pulling it all together and he's carrying this team, all this different stuff, where I think he's right is that he was outstanding in the second half, not only of the season this year for the most part, but also in the second half versus the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, he had an over 130 passer rating in the fourth quarter against the Ravens on Sunday. He had that huge touchdown, obviously, to seal it. 2 straight touchdown drives conducted by him and multiple third and long conversions. I completely agree with that part of it. But where I think Colin is way wrong is that, his claim that Pittsburgh apparently doesn't do anything else well outside of Aaron Rodgers. That is just a complete farce to me. And it just shows that he doesn't watch the Pittsburgh Steelers. He doesn't, take a particularly hard look at where the Steelers rank in a lot of these key metrics. Let's start with the run game. I mean, this is a top 10 run game in the National Football League this year in terms of efficiency. They're 7th in EPA per rush, and they're 6th in rushing success rate this year. So this is a top 10 run game led by one of the better running back duos in football in Jalen Warren and Kenny Gainwell. I mean, Colin's been one of the leaders of this narrative that the Steelers can't run the football. He said it on a number of occasions. That just tells me he doesn't watch the Steelers because the Steelers can clearly run the football. And then also, he said the offensive line isn't very good. The PFF, who he quoted here in his own segment here about the wide receiver core, they ranked the Pittsburgh Steelers in the top 10 among offensive lines in the National Football League. So the same outlet that he's using as a source for his wide receiver rankings, but then he'll turn around and say, oh, the O-line sucks. No, this is actually one of the better young O-lines in football, and also Pittsburgh has the lowest pressure rate in the National Football League, and that's in conjunction with Aaron Rodgers getting the ball out quickly and the offensive line holding up as well as they have this year. So they do that well. Then we look at defense, and listen, man, the defense isn't perfect, but they do things well. They take the football away at a top 5 clip, 27 takeaways this year, and they're also top 10 in sacks. They're also top 5 in pressure rate, so they can get after the quarterback, they can take the football away, they can run the football, they have a good O-line. You're just stacking things up, and then also they can cover with their cornerbacks, all right? You look at the PFSN cornerback impact metric, the top 2 guys in the entire National Football League in this metric are on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Joey Porter Jr., who has been locked down all season long, and James Pierre, who has been a revelation for Pittsburgh this year, are the top 2 guys in football, and that's over guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Pat Surtain and Sauce Gardner, okay? So the Steelers, they can cover, they can get after the quarterback, they can take the football away, they can run the football, and yes, Aaron Rodgers can do some really good things with his arm as well. But Colin Cowherd is just a clown for saying that Rodgers is the only thing that this team can do right. So if you agree with me and you disagree with Colin and you think that he's an absolute clown for having the take that he just gave, click that thumbs up icon if you haven't already. We greatly appreciate your guys' support. That'll be it for today's News and Rumors edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. I know today was a little bit of a longer one. We had some interesting topics to talk about today, but type those real ones down there in the comment section if you made it to the end of today's show. I know today was a little bit of a longer one, but if you made it to the end, that makes you a real one. I want to know who the real ones are down there in the comments. So type those real ones and make sure you guys click that subscribe button to help us beat Texans today in our new subscriber battle. We have in-depth Steelers content like this every single day on this channel. So if you guys want to help us beat the Texans off the field before the Steelers beat them on the field on Monday night, click that subscribe button. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. First segment in the books there, Ponzi. That was a bit of a beast right there. But we got some super chats to get to before we get into our next segment. Gary says, will the Wizard of Boz get his increase next year? So I think he's talking about his contract. Well, he better start making some, kicks in the fourth quarter, Ponzi, because he's missed a big kick in 3 straight games in the fourth quarter. Every single miss put the game in jeopardy. And you can make an argument. It certainly hurt the Steelers in their losing effort versus the Cleveland Browns.
To give Boswell flack or like some credit. The wind was winding.
Yeah, it was.
So Tyler Loop, that field goal got pushed way to the right.
But
and I think Boz had the same thing.
But he's gonna want to get. But what about the chip shot to his standards inside in Detroit? That is unheard of, man. Yeah. So I'm looking at Boz. I still love him. I would definitely give him the increase, but I would love it if he earned it in the playoffs. No misses in the playoffs. That's what I would love to see from Chris Boswell. But yeah,
he's been money.
But yeah, Gary, I do think he's going to get extended this offseason, and he's going to get a nice payday. $10 from Bodie Irwin. It says, who would you want the Steelers to draft in the first round this year if they pick at 21? So this would assume the Steelers lose this weekend. If they pick at 21, I would want a receiver or a nose tackle. Okay, I don't want to pick a quarterback, and I think they're going to take care of the cornerback situation in free agency. I think they probably bring back James Pierre. He's just had too good of a season in this defense to not bring him back, so I think they get that done. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they bring back Seumalo for another one-year contract as well. They've got the money to do it. Otherwise, they might end up putting Broderick Jones at left guard. But with his neck situation, apparently this neck injury is really bad for Broderick Jones. So
it didn't really seem bad whenever we were looking at the replay of the injury. But I guess the neck injuries and spine, all that's connected. It's very scary. So Dylan Cook has been amazing in relief. So I really feel like that's a really blessing for the Steelers. But I don't know what you do with Broderick at this point.
Yeah, maybe just have him as a swing tackle. He's got experience playing both left and right at this point. I just think at this point you definitely don't pick up his fifth-year option.
Do you debate on moving him inside?
Yes. If you don't bring back Seumalo this year, you definitely have that debate because you want to keep Spencer Anderson in kind of the big tight end role next year. And I think Dylan Cook for sure is going to be your starting left tackle next year. So I don't think that's really a debate at this point. Maybe they have a competition between Cook and Broderick, but even if they do that, I think Cook has just shown he's clearly the better player at this point. And you want your best
five on the field for your offensive lineman. And, Broderick does have the size to maybe slide inside and be a solid left guard. We saw that with Mekhi Becton. He slid inside, and he did really good after I think he was a left tackle too.
Yeah. If I had to guess right now, I would say Rodgers comes back, takes a really team-friendly deal, which means there's going to be enough cap space to sign Isaac Seumalo to a one-year deal.
Yeah.
And they'll have Broderick be the swing guy next year. And then in the draft, there's some very good, big run-stuffing defensive tackles in this year's class that could go round one. The kid out of Ohio State, I'm blanking on his name, is really good.
I know who you're talking about,
Caleb Banks is 330 pounds out of Florida. He's currently ranked 17th on the PFF Big Board. Caden McDonald is 326 out of Ohio State. Really good run defender. Amari Washington from Oregon could get Derek Harmon's old teammate. There, he's 330 pounds too. So Lee Hunter's 330. Dante Corleone is 335. There's some big boys in this class, and when it comes to Keanu Benton, I think they got to get him out of the one tech spot. All right, he pretty much needs to play five tech. He should be playing Larry Ogunjobi's old spot.
Yeah.
Stephon Tuitt's old spot, where he's kind of like that 3-4 defensive end. You have Derek Harmon play 3-tech, and then you draft one of these big boys in the first two rounds to be the future nose tackle. I don't think I've seen enough consistency out of Y.A. Black to consider him a long-term starting option. I think he's going to be a really good rotational guy for this team long-term, but until I see the consistency from Y.A., I'm probably beefing up this defensive line again. And something to consider there, Ponzi, is Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, the assistant GM, their philosophy is kind of like the Howie Roseman model, where we are going to draft offensive and defensive line in the first round. All right, if we're not taking a quarterback, we're probably going to be taking trenches. And every single pick in the Omar Khan era in round one has been a trench player. It's been two offensive tackles and then a defensive tackle. So with all these really good run stuffers in the draft this year, I would say nose tackle is kind of an underrated position that not a lot of people are talking about right now. But I also think wide receiver, obviously, because there's a lot of really good receivers. You need wide receiver help, and you need some long-term wide receiver help as well. I think they probably get a veteran. If they bring back Rodgers, I could really see them bringing in Romeo Doubs. I think Doubs could be your veteran wide receiver 2 to start the season, and then you could bring in somebody in the draft in the first round, whether that's Mekhi Lemon, whether that's Denzel Boston, whether that's Elijah Surratt, whether that's Chris Brazzell from Tennessee. There's a lot of good wide receivers in this class. So for me personally, I would say wide receiver or defensive tackle.
Which one would you pick first? Which one do they have a higher grade on? Because
probably wide receiver, because you can get a good nose tackle on day 2.
Yeah, and I feel
you can't get like a legit wide receiver 2 on day 1 kind of guy.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some guys with some red flags on day 2 where you can get like maybe a blue chip wide receiver 1 of the future on day 1 of the draft.
Yeah, the last time the Steelers picked a wide receiver in the first round was
Santonio Holmes.
Yes, it's 2006 with Santonio Holmes. So they usually have been like second and third round guys. Like I know Pickens was a third, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things where it's like I feel like this year has to be different with wide receiver just based off of how you saw. Like Rodgers literally had to carry like a good bit in that week 17.
And by the way, you give Rodgers a couple of like legitimately like really good route runners and separators. Like we could and you still have Jalen Warren and Darnell Washington and Kenny Gainwell underneath. Like watch out, man. Like if you can add like 2 more good receivers to this offense and with $65 million in cap space and 12 draft picks, it's very doable. Like this Steelers offense could be really dangerous next year with Aaron Rodgers in his second year here in Pittsburgh. Gary with a 2 says, if my aunt had man parts, she'd be my uncle. Tomlinism of the century. I know it's kind of an old saying, but like it was just a perfect moment there at the end of his press conference on Sunday night. $5 from Jordan Brown. Says, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you like our chances versus the Texans? And what are your predictions on the first round of the playoffs?
Is that talking about like in general?
Yeah, I think he's just talking about generals. But I'll tell you about this week's game against the Texans. I would give us, I think it's pretty close to a 50-50 split. I think the Steelers should be favored slightly. I'd probably give myself a 55% probability, which, is better than, less than 50. You are home. It is a warm weather team coming to a cold weather environment. It's not going to be that cold. It's going to be like in the low 30s, I think, by kickoff, and it's going to be pretty steady.
Not that cold.
So
in Pittsburgh.
so like for Pittsburgh standards in January, that's not that cold, but it's definitely colder than what C.J. Stroud and the Texans are used to.
Yeah.
They have no run game. So the Steelers can pretty much live in 2 high safety stuff, which they've been doing at a really high level this year. James Pierre and JPJ have been locked down in man coverage this season, and C.J. Stroud struggles in cold weather games. So I think it's going to be a defensive battle, and I think it's going to come down to a couple of plays in the fourth quarter. And honestly, I trust Aaron Rodgers to deliver those fourth quarter moments in a colder weather game than C.J. Stroud on the road, dealing with the Yinzers, dealing with Renegade, dealing with the terrible towels flying in the air. I don't know if he's going to be able to handle it, and the super experienced Rodgers, I just trust him more than C.J. Stroud to deliver in the fourth quarter in this ball game. I think it's going to be a one-score game. I think it's going to be another stressful football game for us, and a play here or play there, the Steelers could easily lose this game. But I definitely think the Steelers have a chance, and if I had to pick a team to win today, I'm picking the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I mean, I think like one of those things too is that like Rodgers already did it this last week in that gotta have it moment.
Yeah, but it wasn't against the defense like Houston though.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair enough.
Like they got incredible cover players and great pass rush. Like they're the best defense in football right now. So if you get into a position like you were against Baltimore, where you got to put together a drive, 2 minutes, no timeouts, it's going to be tough to do it against this defense. So I think it's going to be low scoring, going to be grinded out, classic Steelers football. But the thing is, man, Tomlin teams and the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're comfortable in those types of games. So we'll see if they can pull it out. $5 from Black Wolf says, what is your thought on our OC? If Rodgers is back, does that mean the OC is going to stay with Smith? Almost 100%. Unless Smith gets a head coaching job, which apparently there's some interest to interview him, but like I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job. I think he'll be back next year. I do. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, Arthur Smith sucks at play calling. And there's certain moments where, like, why is that the play that we're giving Aaron in the huddle? But something fans need to understand is that Rodgers has a big, final say on what the final play call is. Because Rodgers has not only just one play call from Art. It's not like Art is saying, okay, Aaron, here's the play, and then that's the only option. No, like he usually has not one, but 2 plays in the huddle. And then he also has a number of dead calls where he can audible to whatever concept he wants, whether it's a stick or a dragon or whatever. Okay, they've got a bunch of signals to change the play on if Rodgers sees something. So Rodgers has a lot of control at the line of scrimmage. Okay, so when people criticize Arthur Smith for some of these play calls, sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, Aaron was the one that confirmed it pre-snap. So, like, it's kind of on Aaron Rodgers. So, not to say Rodgers is not playing well, but, like, when Rodgers is not on and he's making some of these mistakes, it can really lead to some downhill, performance from the Steelers offense. We saw that versus Cleveland. Rodgers made some very big mistakes in terms of which plays he was getting the offense into, some of the decisions he was making with the football in certain situations, like that 4th and 1 go ball to Scotty Miller, for Christ's sakes.
In the Cleveland game, that was crazy.
And then, like, also the toss play at the 1 yard line with 1 second left when you have a Steel City shove, like, that was one of the worst play calls I've ever seen. And the fact that both Arthur Smith thought it was a good idea in the first place, and then Aaron Rodgers, as smart as he is, thought it was a good idea as well. Like, what the hell are we thinking here, boys? Like, let's call a better play than that. Like that, and that play almost cost us the season, Ponzi. That was a 7-point swing in that ball game.
I think a lot of people in hindsight were like, "Oh, kick the field goal," but like, I think the correct decision was to go for it at that point.
Go for it and do the Steel City shove,
exactly.
or the Pittsburgh plunge, or whatever you want to call it. Like
the brotherly shove in that case.
Well, the brotherly shove is Philadelphia.
Well, no, because Cam Hayward pushing.
Well, I guess, yeah, the brotherly shove with Cam pushing. Yeah, that's a good point. $2 from George Pickensburg says Boswell's PAT actually went down as a block kick. Did it? I didn't see that.
Yeah, it was. It was. They said, I don't know who blocked it, but it was partially tipped.
Okay. Well, like I honestly don't know if he makes it anyway.
It did alter the ball. You could see like the ball kind of get altered a little bit.
All right. Well, hopefully there's not another one of those this week. No. Let's keep the kicks clean this week. That's all I ask. $2 from Jordan Brown says you're the men, Jack and Ponzi. Jordan, you're the man. I appreciate you. $2 from Brian says Ratbirds about to take Buffalo. What's that? Oh, Brian Flores or Shula from us. Shaking my head. I would say Flores is. If I were Baltimore, I would want Flores, but I'm a big Flo guy. If I was any team that needed a coach, I would want B Flo. So we'll see. There's a lot of Jesse Minter talk surrounding the Baltimore job right now.
That's kind of weird to me because like it's the same. It's basically Harbaugh 2.0. Not really, but kind of.
Yeah, I mean Jesse's a true defensive guy, but he's in that family, right? He's in that family of coaching. So. I'm hoping they don't hire Flores. That would suck. But something tells me, man, that they're not gonna hire him. I think Brian Flores might actually go to Las Vegas.
Really? I mean,
because apparently Tom Brady is pushing pretty hard to get Flores in. And then he wants Dable as OC.
Yeah, I mean that would kind of make sense. But like if I was Flores and I'm looking at the Raiders and I'm looking at the Ravens, like...
I agree. If I'm Flores, I'm taking the Ravens. I'm just saying I'm not sure if the Ravens are going to be smart.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I feel like the early talk has been obviously Harbaugh to the Giants, which I feel like that kind of eliminates Arthur Smith from any head coaching talk. I think Giants were pretty much the only spot for him. But, like, man, Flores kind of just seems like a perfect hire for Baltimore. And I think that, like, if they don't get him, that's the biggest disappointment of the season for them.
Yeah. We'll see what they end up deciding. That's going to be a very desirable job with Lamar Jackson in his prime.
They're pretty much built. Like, they have Kyle Hamilton. They have a great roster. Like, I feel like It wasn't saying
Watch
Harbaugh.
them bring in like Bill Belichick or some shit. Watch them do something crazy like that. $5 from Bodie Irwin. He says, "Who do you think Kylie Steelers should deft in? Who do you think 2 seconds young if we draft we in the front?" Bodie, if you want to send another one, dude, I have no idea what that question is. So if you,
it's like, who do you think we should draft?
Yeah, something draft.
Okay, hold up. Who do we think we should draft in the second if we draft a wide receiver in the first?
That could be it. Probably nose tackle.
Yeah.
So, whoever's available there, whether it's Banks, whether it's, whether it's McDonald, whether it's, Mari Washington, Lee Hunter, Corleone, there's quite a few of these big body dudes in the draft next year. And I think what the Steelers need with Cam Hayward going into his final year is somebody that they can draft, someone that can be a rotational piece next year, and somebody that can step up to be a starter in 2027. That's what they need to do at that position, and you can get that kind of player on day 2. The reason why I said wide receiver in round 1 to your first question there, Bodie, was because you need somebody that can contribute as a starter immediately. All right, you need that true number 3 guy that can be your number 3 right away. Maybe by the end of the season can be your number 2, and then can maybe even eventually be your long-term number 1. All right, that's what you're looking for. You got to get that guy in round 1. There's more than enough good nose tackles in this draft where in round 2 you can get one of those guys. So if I had a choice right now, depending on how the board fell, I would go wide receiver round 1, nose tackle round 2. And after that, I don't really know. I'd probably go best player available on your board because your roster is pretty well set after that. Maybe linebacker. You'd probably need some, I think at some point you got to take linebacker.
Like Patrick Queen's in his last
Eventually,
year.
you might want to take safety. You might want to eventually take, some sort of corner depth. But you got a lot of draft picks. And I think wide receiver, nose tackle are going to be the 2 positions we're really talking about come draft time.
And that was the question, by the way. He did clarify it was that.
Okay. Well, that's a great job by Ponzi to identify all that right there. $2 from Black Wolf says, just seen 7 teams in 45 minutes contacted Jim Harbaugh.
I mean, why wouldn't they?
And by the way, there's 6 teams that currently have head coaching openings that are not Baltimore. So that means that there's a team with a current head coach under contract that contacted Harbaugh's representation.
Our Dolphins host thinks it's the Dolphins.
And by the way, it could be more teams. It could be Tampa with Todd Bowles. It could be even the Bengals with Zach Taylor. Who knows, man?
That'd be crazy.
That'd be crazy, man. We might see a couple more firings before it's all said and done here, and the coaching carousel keeps spinning. But now let's get into our next segment here, guys, and we'll talk a little bit more about some coaching rumors because Teryl Austin, the Steelers' defensive coordinator's contract is up after this year. Are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to keep him, or are they going to let him walk? And then if so, which coaches should the Steelers consider bringing in as their new defensive coordinator next year? Well, we're going to be talking about that here in just a second, so let's get into it. Just going to find my place here. All right, man, we're good. Let's get into our next segment right now, right here on Steelers Talk Live. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of a spotlight piece on defensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Teryl Austin. And could the Pittsburgh Steelers bring him back and sign him to a new contract this offseason because his contract does expire at the end of this year? After Pittsburgh's second half turnaround, does it make sense for Pittsburgh to bring back their DC, or should they consider bringing somebody else in to be the new defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers? We're going to have that discussion here today on Steelers Talk. So before we get into the content today, make sure you guys click that subscribe button for all the latest surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. If Pittsburgh makes coaching changes this year, if we get a new defensive coordinator, if they fire Pat Meyer, which would be crazy after the way that the offensive line is playing, or Arthur Smith, or whatever ends up happening, if Mike Tomlin surprisingly decides to leave the Steelers, we're going to have it all covered for you guys this year. We'll also have extended extensive coverage of free agency, trades, the draft this year. So if you guys want to keep tabs on everything the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing this offseason, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. So like I said at the top of today's show, guys, Teryl Austin, the current defensive coordinator here of the Pittsburgh Steelers, his contract expires after this year. And usually the way the Steelers, do business with their coordinators under Mike Tomlin as their head coach is they usually let their contracts expire and then, they kind of assess it at that point. They very rarely fire coaches early. They have exceptions, Matt Canada, for example, but there's going to be a decision that has to be made on Teryl Austin this offseason. And listen, man, it's been a very disappointing year, just generally speaking, defensively for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Look at where this team ranks in a lot of these categories, and, this team heading into the year was talking about, we're going to do historic things, and we're going to be top 3 in every category, and we're going to be dominant, and it just hasn't been the case. They've been pretty good in the red zone. They've been pretty darn good taking the football away, but that's really been about it in terms of the grand picture of the season, because in the first half, this Steelers defense was terrible. They were siphoning off yards. They couldn't stop the run. They were giving up close to 30 points a game. This was a bad defense in the first half of the season. But just generally speaking here, in the Terrell Austin era, when, by the way, this defense has consistently been one of, if not the most expensive defense in professional football, they're right around league average. And from 2022 to 2025, this is what the Steelers rank in. All right, they're around league average in EPA per play allowed. They're technically top 10 in success rate. They're 12th in EPA per drop back, and then 20th in EPA per rush. Those are pretty pedestrian numbers for a team that spends a lot of money on the defensive side of the ball. You can make an argument that Teryl Austin hasn't been, holding up his end of the bargain in terms of, getting this defense to perform the way that it needs to be if you're going to spend as much money as you do on this side of the football. And you guys can see where the Steelers have ranked in points per game, EPA per play, and success rate over the course of the Teryl Austin era here since 2022. And, it's been okay. It seemed like you were progressively getting better. 2023 was definitely this team's best season defensively. You were really starting to get things going at the end of 2022. That culminates in a really good 2023. Austin ends up getting a second contract here in Pittsburgh after that season. And then last year, you have a great start and then not so great of a finish on defense. And then this year, not so great to start and then kind of middling towards the end. But this defense has gotten a lot better in the second half, and we'll talk about that later in the show. But, guys, these numbers with the most expensive defense in professional football suggest Pittsburgh should let Teryl Austin walk and then find a new defensive coordinator to lead this group and call the defensive plays moving forward. However, this Steelers defense has turned a corner here late in the 2025 season, and they've been playing some pretty darn good football down the stretch, especially over the last month. We're seeing this pass rush come alive. We're seeing, Joey Porter Jr. and James Pierre lock people down in coverage. The linebacker play has been better. And you guys can see in the first half of the season, this defense was absolutely, maybe not, complete dumpster fire terrible, but they were, around borderline top 20. Now they're borderline like top 12 or, at least top 15. They are an above average defense at this point in the season. And, to kind of do the kind of surgery that they did on this roster and on this defense midway through the season and then find a way to have some success in the second half of the year is commendable, especially when you take a look at the last month here. The Pittsburgh Steelers are 5th in points per game allowed in the last month. They're also 6th in success rate allowed, and, their run defense is top 5 in the league over the last month, okay? So this has been a group that has really turned a corner. And then specifically, before the fourth quarter, this Steelers defense is one of the best in football. All right. Now they've given up some pretty big fourth quarters over the last month to Detroit and then to, of course, the Baltimore Ravens, which have skewed the numbers a little bit. But when you go just the first 3 quarters over the last 4 games, last 4 weeks, the Pittsburgh Steelers are pretty much top 5 in all of the key metrics that you look at. They're getting teams off the field. They are getting after the quarterback. They're playing good coverage. Now in the fourth quarter, sometimes sometimes, some of these quarterbacks like Jared Goff and Lamar Jackson have toasted them a little bit when the game, they have to start throwing the ball a little bit more, and that's something the Steelers defense needs to clean up. But even more here, guys, Pittsburgh's defensive turnaround, like it's not just happening, in a vacuum where, the defense hasn't changed at all. The players are just playing better. No, Teryl Austin and Mike Tomlin actively performed surgery on this roster midway through the season and completely changed their defensive philosophy midway through the year, and it has led to the results that we're seeing here where the Pittsburgh Steelers defense is playing their best football of the season when it matters most as we approach the NFL playoffs this week. And, the original vision for this defense was, we're going to man everybody up. Jalen Ramsey's going to shut people down. Darius Slay going to shut people down. Joey Porter Jr. going to shut people down. We're just going to man up everybody. We're going to blitz. We're going to put pressure on the quarterback, and our coverage on the back end with our cornerbacks are going to be so good, nobody's going to be able to get jack shit on this defense. Well, guess what? Jalen Ramsey, not a great man corner anymore, and neither was Darius Slay. In fact, both of them are pretty I won't say Ramsey's cooked, but, he is diminishing as an athlete, and then Darius Slay is just straight up cooked at this point in time. And they had to completely change the way that this defense, went about its business because, with the coverage being as bad as it was, offenses were just getting the ball out super fast, completely negating the talent on the Steelers' defensive front. The linebackers weren't playing good in run defense. Keanu Benson was playing really poorly, in run defense as well. Couldn't stop the run. He couldn't cover anybody, and it led to, a really bad defense in the first half of the year. But then they completely overhaul their secondary in the middle of the season, okay? You start the season with Joey Porter Jr. He's fine. He stayed in that spot all season long. But then, Darius Slay, who was a complete disaster, you cut bait with him and you address that problem, and you bring in James Pierre, who has been one of the best corners in football since he joined the defense. Then at nickel, you start the season with Jalen Ramsey, and honestly, Ramsey was okay playing nickel, but they move him to safety and they get rid of Juan Thornhill's ass, okay, and then Deshaun Elliott gets injured, and then you end up doing this little shuffle here where you put Brandon Echols, who has been a really great signing for the Steelers this year, in the slot, and he's been really good as your starting slot guy. Then you have Jalen Ramsey, and then you trade for Kyle Duggar after the Deshaun Elliott injury, and, Jalen and Kyle have been a really good safety duo. Now, I would say Duggar over the last 2 games in particular hasn't been phenomenal, but, that's been, a pretty decent safety tandem in the second half of the year. Also, Pittsburgh shifted to a more zone and match heavy scheme. They started the year playing so much cover one and so much man coverage, and they were just getting absolutely obliterated. You have to give some credit to Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin for identifying the problems with this defense and then, finding some solutions, not only in terms of personnel, but also in terms of scheme. They're playing a lot more too-high pre-snap looks in the second half of the season, which has allowed the Steelers to be a little bit more ambiguous before the snap. They can do their post-snap rotations, get into Tampa or cover 3 or quarters or even cover 1 from the two-high safety pre-snap alignments. And what that does, guys, is it forces quarterbacks to hold the ball a little bit longer. It forces them to read the defense post-snap, and it gives the Steelers' pass rush, which is really good, more time to get after quarterbacks, and that's why you're seeing the Steelers' defense perform better in the second half of the season than in the first half of the season. And yes, the coaching does deserve credit for it. I mean, this is a tandem here in Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin that just gets obliterated for quote-unquote never making adjustments. They made not only personnel adjustments, but also schematic adjustments in the middle of a season, and it worked. All right, that is commendable, and that is something that is worthy of a pat on the back. However, there is a DC candidate out there that I think is going to be really tough for the Steelers to pass up on if the Steelers can realistically get him, and it might mean Teryl Austin's time in Pittsburgh, although, the second half effort in this year's season has been commendable. It might still be time to move on if you can get a high-end DC prospect. But before we get into who that is, make sure you guys get down there in the comment section and let me know. Should Teryl Austin be back next year as the defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers? Give me a yes yes or no down there in the comment section. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. So in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today. And while I tell you about our sponsor, simply give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section. And with that, if you guys want to celebrate the 2025 AFC North Championship for your Pittsburgh Steelers, we've got officially licensed AFC North Championship gear on our website right now. When you guys go to chatsports.com/AFC North, we've got the 2 officially licensed t-shirts as well as the officially licensed Division Championship hat. Of course, all this stuff was worn by the players and coaches last Sunday night. At least it's the same, you guys get what I'm saying. They're not actually worn by the players, but like it's the same stuff that was worn by the players on Sunday night when they won the division championship. And every single purchase helps us out, guys. When you click our link, chatsports.com/AFC North, we get part of the proceeds of that purchase. So that helps us pay rents and, buy new graphics packages and raffle items and all that fun stuff that keeps this content free for you guys right here on YouTube. So again, chatsports.com/AFC North to make it happen. And the guy that I was referring to as maybe the can't-miss defensive coordinator candidate that's out there now is former Atlanta head coach Raheem Morris. And it's actually pretty realistic that the Steelers could land him if they want him as their next defensive coordinator, specifically because of his ties to head coach Mike Tomlin. Now, I know what you guys are saying at home. I'm tired of Tomlin, hiring his friends. Well, that's what every coach does, first of all. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. I mean, that's not just football, that's in every business. But, Raheem Morris is, a really great coach, and there's a lot of great players in this league that have complimented him, and he's a legit defensive coordinator. When he's just allowed to just sit there, game plan for a defense, and then call defensive plays, he's really good at it. It's what got him the opportunity in Atlanta in the first place because he was doing such a good job with the Los Angeles Rams. And, he's coached in pretty much every single scheme you could think of. The Tampa 2 under Monty Kiffin. By the way, that's where he met Mike Tomlin, was working for Tony Dungy and John Gruden there with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But, he's coached under Dan Quinn, with the Seattle 3 style of defense. He coached under Brandon Staley when he brought the quarters and cover 6 stuff to LA, and that's what he ran as DC there in LA. Like, this guy has a wide array of experience, and Raheem also has connections to more people in this organization, not named Mike Tomlin as well. Jalen Ramsey also has a big connection to Raheem, where Jalen is actually on record saying that Raheem Morris is the greatest coach he's ever had. The exact quote was, "Ra is the best coach I've ever had, and I've had some great ones." So, Jalen Ramsey, who's almost assuredly going to be back next year with the way his contract is structured here in Pittsburgh, he would certainly love for Raheem Morris to be his defensive coordinator again here in Pittsburgh. And, another thing that he said on Twitter a couple years ago was, Falcons got one of, if not the best coach in the NFL for real. That was him reacting to the news of Morris getting the job in Atlanta. And then he also quote tweeted that one by saying, "It ain't just me who thinks this. Ask any player who he's played for Rob, and they'll tell you the same thing." So he's a good defensive coordinator, guys, who just happens to have a connection to Mike Tomlin. And, if you feel like you can get him, I think he would be an upgrade over Teryl Austin. I think Austin's done a commendable job helping to fix this defense midseason, but I think with the underperformance of the last 4 years in this defense, to be quite frank with you, if you can get a guy like Raheem Morris, who's an elite defensive coordinator candidate, I think I would hire him. And some other guys that are now out there that might be strike Mike Tomlin's fancy is a future DC here in Pittsburgh, Jim Schwartz, who has been in the division, and he actually coaches a man-heavy defense better than anybody in football. So if that's what Mike Tomlin's vision is for this Steelers defense, Schwartz makes a lot of sense, although I'm guessing he probably follows Stefanski to wherever he goes. But Jeff Ulbrich, I'm guessing, would come pretty highly recommended by Raheem Morris. So if Raheem goes somewhere else, I'm sure Ulbrich will be highly recommended by him. Patrick Graham is somebody that I've admired for many years. I think he's elevated that Raiders Steelers defense that has had no talent on it for years at this point. I really like his scheme diversity that he's put together in Las Vegas over the last several years. It's just a shame they've never given him any talent outside of Max Crosby. Joe Witt Jr. Helped lead the Commanders to an NFC Championship game last year. He was recently fired by the Commanders. And then Brian Flores, if he doesn't get a head coaching job this year, his contract expires in Minnesota. Would he like to come to Pittsburgh, work for Mike Tomlin again, and be the heir apparent to Mike Tomlin to be the next head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers while getting his feet wet as the DC? It's probably very unlikely. I think he's going to get a head coaching job, but it's an interesting idea for sure. And if the Steelers can bring Coach Flo back, I certainly would be on board. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Who do you want as Pittsburgh's defensive coordinator next year? Do you want Teryl Austin back? Would you like to bring in Raheem Morris? Would you like to bring in somebody else? Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. And that'll be it for today's edition of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. I appreciate all of your guys' support. We will be getting you guys more Wild Card Week coverage all throughout this week, so make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. All right, we got one more segment to go here on live, and of course we got some super chat questions to get to. Marco says we need a safety blanket because our play style is tailored to the blitz, and what happens is we send everything. We need someone to catch the leaks. Safety said it last year, and here we are again. Is he talking about safety blanket? So is he saying the safety position is something that we need next year? Because my guess is, because Echols is under contract next year, I'm guessing what they're going to do is they're going to have Ramsey and Deshaun Elliott be the starting safeties next year, Marco. So I don't think the Steelers feel like they need safety. They need safety depth, but I think they have their starting safety duo kind of already set in stone because I think they want to keep Echols as a slot guy next year, and I think they're going to want to keep Ramsey at safety. And then, of course, Deshaun Elliott is back next year. So I think that's probably the way that they handle that. Now, if you want to get, somebody in the draft, for example, to be a younger guy that can learn from Ramsey and Deshaun and be maybe a future starter in this defense and be a good third safety, that's something I'm very down for. In the middle rounds, get a talented guy that can be molded by Ramsey and Elliott. But I think going into next year, my friend, I think it's going to be Ramsey and Elliott as the starting safety duo here in Pittsburgh. $2 from Tink says, stop picking the Steelers to win. You'll jinx us. Well, Tink, here's my plan. All right, I'm gonna reveal my plan just so nobody's confused. Okay, last week. Okay, last week. In the preview and all of our pregame coverage, I predicted the Steelers to win. But it's always on the watch party where whenever I put my prediction on the watch party, it's always the opposite. So I'm picking the Steelers to win in the pregame stuff during the week, but when we get to the watch party, I will be picking the Texans because every time I pick against the Steelers, they win when it comes to the watch party. And every time I pick the Steelers to win, they lose. All right, so I'm picking, I think the Steelers, are more likely to win, but I will be, quote unquote, picking the Texans to win on Monday night.
All I'm saying, man, you're putting that out in the universe. You can't have your reverse jinx work. You put it out in the universe, so.
I said it last week and we won.
I know.
What are you talking about, reverse jinx?
I'm just saying in the universe.
What are we talking about, man? Next question. Bodie with a 2. Appreciate you, my friend. Another one from Marco says above average defense, and you think it's on nose tackle. I think it's on nose tackle safety. I don't think it's. I mean, listen, man. Jalen Ramsey, Kyle Duggar did not play great last week. Another thing that I'll say is that the Steelers played a completely different style of defense than what they usually play with those two safeties. What I mean by that is against the Ravens, they load the box. 1 high safety or 0 high safeties very, very consistently. Against pretty much everybody else, they play a lot of 2 high safety stuff. And that's the world where the Steelers' defense is comfortable. And that's where Duggar and where Jalen Ramsey play a lot better. Okay? And by the way, next year, Duggar won't be the starting safety. It'll be Deshaun Elliott, who we all know is a good player. So my biggest concern there, and why I think nose tackle is probably a bigger concern in terms of the earlier rounds of the draft, is because you don't have a nose tackle. Like, you have Keanu Benton, but he is a penetrator, and he gets driven backwards consistently. He has no anchor at all, and it's a big problem for the Steelers' run defense, okay? And unless he is like doing a successful swim move or getting into the backfield, or Derek Harmon or Cam Hayward are both, holding the line of scrimmage, it's a big issue, okay? And especially when you have Patrick Queen missing 21+% of his tackles, Peyton Wilson, who's not quite yet a great run-defending linebacker, it can create some issues because the middle of the Steelers' run defense is a bit soft, and it's been a bit soft all season long. So with Cam Hayward expected to retire after next season, I want to fortify the 3-man defensive line rotation of the future next year in the draft, okay? You already have, hopefully, Keanu Benton and Derek Harmon as your future defensive ends, all right, but we don't have that guy in the middle that can anchor against those double teams, hold the line of scrimmage, and force these runs more out to the perimeter. Okay, like a lot of these teams that go up against the Steelers' run defense can just go right up the middle because Keanu Benton's getting driven off of his gap, and it's creating a hole in the middle of the defense. That's a big problem. So that's something that I think needs to be addressed in the years to come. Whereas with safety, Jalen Ramsey is fine at safety. All right, he's not a liability at safety like some people want to make it out to be. I know he gave up that big touchdown to Tez Walker, but that doesn't mean he's a terrible player now. Okay, he's a good football player, and so is Deshaun Elliott. So I think that the starting safety duo heading into next year is honestly a pretty decent duo. But that's my opinion. If you disagree, that's fine with me, Marco. $5 from Chumper says, do you think Will Howard gets the starting quarterback position once Rodgers leaves? Well, I'll say this. I think Rodgers does have some say, and he might have some influence where, if he retires and he goes up to Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan and says, this Will Howard kid's got it, it might give him a shot. Now, here's what I'll say. As long as Will Howard doesn't, show what he can do in a regular season game, the most he's going to get heading into a season is a chance to compete for the job with a veteran, okay, or another rookie for that matter, or a younger player for that matter. They're not just going to hand a 6th-round pick that hasn't played a single down preseason or otherwise in the NFL the starting job in a win-now season. They're just not going to do that, all right? We're not going to do the J.J. McCarthy situation here in Pittsburgh. And by the way, J.J. McCarthy was a top 10 pick, and that was the wrong decision for Minnesota. The Steelers in this situation would be handing the keys over to a completely unknown product. That's a 6th-round draft pick, and there's a reason why he was in there in the 6th-round pick. In the 6th round, guys. I understand he's a national champion. He played really good in the college football playoff, but did you watch him for most of that season, man? That regular season tape is rough for Will Howard, okay? It just is. And until he proves himself on an NFL field, I don't think you can just hand him the job. If you're going to give him a chance to earn the job, and you want to bring in a Geno Smith or a Kirk Cousins or something like that to compete with him, I don't like that plan personally, but that's something that you could do. But as much as I like Will Howard, he's a 6th-round pick. This team doesn't owe him anything. And unless he proves himself on the field in an actual game, I just don't know if you can hand him the keys.
I'm seeing some Brock Purdy talk.
Brock Purdy? No, man. He's not comparable to Brock Purdy. Dude, I actually like Brock Purdy. And here's the thing. Purdy proved himself before he earned the job. He got a chance to play, and he played awesome. That's why he got the job. All right? He didn't get, this is not the same situation, guys, at all. All right? I think Will Howard has some starting quality, starter qualities. But here's the thing. Number one, he doesn't have a ton of upside, in my opinion. I think his upside is a guy like Derek Carr, maybe slightly more athletic than Derek Carr. All right? People want to compare him to Josh Allen, like John Gruden. I think that's just irresponsible and unfair to Will Howard. To put the expectations of MVP-level quarterback on Will Howard is insane to me. He does not have the same wiggle. He does not have the same arm talent. He does not have any of that, okay? But, could he be a pretty decent, backup or maybe even a, low-end starter type of guy? Sure, but, is that the guy that we want leading the franchise into the future? A mid-level starter at best? I would rather have a higher-level dude. As much as I like Will as a person, and I think that I'm rooting for him and all that stuff, I'm just trying to be realistic about what the expectations for Will Howard should be. Because he's not Brock Purdy. He does not throw with anticipation the level that Brock Purdy does. He just doesn't, okay? And I liked Purdy coming out of Iowa State because of that anticipation. But Howard is a see-it-throw-it guy. He was at Ohio State, and hey, when you got Jeremiah Smith and fucking Emeka Egbuka and all these guys, and you have Travion Henderson as your check down option, life can be pretty easy for you in college football, man. That was just a loaded offense that he got the benefit of playing in my opinion. $2 from Gary Frank says, Jack's pick power, and we don't lose on Monday Night Football, we win. 100%, man. Did we get a Venmo? Oh, we did. Okay. I will send your way. Is that it on the Super Chats? Yeah, I think we're done. Okay. Well, we got a $1 Venmo here from Hat Guy LTs. And he says, might be a dumb question, but where is Peyton Wilson? Feel like I haven't seen him in a minute. Peyton has kind of gone back to his old role that he was playing last year as a rotational passing down linebacker. Because he, frankly, has not played great as a run defender this year, and Malik Harrison is an awesome run defender. So they have Harrison out there on early downs to be that thumper, that quote-unquote a Landon Roberts guy. And, of course, they let E-Rob go this offseason because they expected Peyton Wilson to put on weight, be able to be a little bit more of a thumper, be an every down guy. And unfortunately, that's just not what he turned into this year. And it also didn't help that Patrick Queen was one of the worst run defending linebackers in football. So they needed, an E-Rob in there. They needed a thumper, and they found one in Malik Harrison, man. He just detonates on people. So that's why you haven't been seeing Peyton Wilson as much. He is the special teams captain. So, he's actually played very well on special teams this year, and he even did last year as well. But Wilson's out there, but it's more on sub-package looks. All right, I think we got another Venmo here. We did. That's another Hat Guy LT's one. He says, Jack, people wanted Justin Fields. My question is, who's better, Justin Fields or Will Howard? Oh, man, good question. Listen, I just haven't seen Will Howard in the NFL, so I have to go right now with Justin Fields. And, you guys know, I'm not the biggest Justin Fields guy in the world, okay? You guys know that, okay? But until I see Will Howard do something in the NFL, I have nothing to base my opinion that he's better than Justin Fields on. I have nothing to make that case on. So, plus, Fields was objectively a better college quarterback than Will Howard. So, you can't even look to the college resume. I mean, Will Howard did win a national championship and Fields didn't. But, yeah, if Justin was on that team with Jeremiah Smith and Egbuka and Henderson and Judkins and, the offensive line that they had, he would have won this. He would have won it. No question about it. So, I have to go Justin Fields, Hat Guy LTs. Yeah, that's the answer to that. All right, we do have one more question. Or not one more question, one more segment to get to here. And it's a fun one, okay? Of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers have made the NFL playoffs for a third straight season. And I think this year has the potential to be different. I'm not guaranteeing that the Steelers will get a playoff win. In fact, I think this week is very much a toss-up of sorts versus the Houston Texans. But I think it is realistic and possible that Pittsburgh can not only win this week against Houston, but they could put together and string together multiple wins in this year's AFC playoffs. All right, today I'm going to be explaining my reasons why. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today on Steelers Talk, I'm going to tell you why I believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers can realistically go on a run in the AFC playoffs this year. I've got 8 reasons why I think the Steelers can legitimately make some noise in the AFC playoffs this year, and really defy expectations. Once again, nobody's really expecting much out of this Steelers group because of some of the history with this team not winning playoff games. If they don't win on Monday versus Houston, it'll be 9 straight years without a playoff win. But I think this year could be different, and today I'm going to be explaining my reasons why. Now, before we get into today's show, get us started down there in the comments section by letting me know, do you believe in this year's Steelers team? Give me a yes or no down there in the comment section to get us started. For me personally, guys, obviously I do believe in this Steelers team, at least to some degree, and I think they could make some noise. My first reason why is because the Steelers are old. Well, it's more specifically, they've got a lot of experience, all right? And there's this very experienced veteran roster. And, in my opinion, guys, experience, especially playoff experience and Super Bowl experience, and this Steelers team intentionally brought in multiple people that have won Super Bowls before and are NFL champions for a reason. When things get thick in these playoff games, that experience is going to matter. And the Steelers are currently the second oldest roster in the NFL. The only roster that's older is the Washington Commanders, who are, by the way, by far the oldest team in the National Football League. But there's a lot of been there and done that with this Steelers roster this year. Maybe in terms of guys like Cam Hayward and TJ Watt, they haven't necessarily put up the big playoff wins, but guys like Jalen Ramsey have. He's a Super Bowl champion. Kenny Gainwell won a Super Bowl last year with Philly. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers won a Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers before. There are Super Bowl champions on this football team. There's a lot of players on here with a ton of playoff experience as well. And I just think that this is a roster here on both sides of the football that, is built for those thick moments in the playoffs, as Mike Tomlin likes to refer them as. And when things get tight, I think this veteran group is going to be ready to meet the call. And then especially our quarterback here in Aaron Rodgers, and his playoff experience, I think, gives the Steelers their, competitive edge in these playoffs. And we'll talk about, how he compares and his experience compares to the rest of the AFC here in just a second. But playoff experience matters, guys. It just does, especially when you're talking about quarterback, all right? Very rarely do young quarterbacks who are new to playoff football win. Why is that? It's because this is the biggest stage they've ever been on at the highest level of football, playing against the best teams, and even when they're home, they don't have a ton of success. It's one of the reasons why the Steelers have brought in veteran quarterbacks these last 2 years, is because they want to advance in the playoffs, and they don't want to have to wait 2 or 3 years where, a rookie quarterback being brought in has to get, his feet wet in the playoffs before he can legitimately compete for a Super Bowl. And that's exactly what Aaron Rodgers provides for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's got 21 playoff games in his career under his belt. The rest of the AFC quarterbacks combined have a combined 22 games, all right? The only one that has more than 4 is Josh Allen with 13. And obviously, he has really racked them up throughout his career, even though he's never been to a Super Bowl, which is kind of crazy at this point, given how many games he's played in. But then in terms of playoff wins and the ability to know how to win in the playoffs, Aaron Rodgers laps the field, okay? And Josh Allen has 7 wins in his own right. He's kind of the other experienced playoff quarterback in the field. But everybody else, man, C.J. Stroud has 2 wins, Trevor Lawrence has 1, and that's it. Herbert, Nix, and May have never won in the postseason. Doesn't mean that they can't, but those guys are definitely going to have a harder time because they don't have that experience of knowing how to win in the postseason. So Rodgers, with his playoff experience and then his experience winning football games in the postseason, is going to give the Pittsburgh Steelers a winning edge, in my opinion. And it also shows up in the big moments and in the fourth quarter when it comes to Rodgers. And we saw that last week in what essentially was a playoff game. I mean, it was more like a play-in game versus the Baltimore Ravens. But with the season on the line, with Lamar Jackson chucking up huge touchdown passes to Zay Flowers and the like, and they were just lighting up the Steelers defense in the fourth quarter, Aaron Rodgers met them step for step and delivered 2 touchdown drives in the fourth quarter. He had 130 passer rating and, of course, delivered that big touchdown on a 3rd and 10 to Calvin Austin III. I think that one probably goes more towards Calvin's route. It was an awesome route, and he was wide open. But Rodgers certainly deserves credit for the 3rd and 8s and the 3rd and 10s and the 3rd and 9s that he was converting on those drives and orchestrating those drives even when he didn't have the timeouts. So obviously, if that situation shows up again in the playoffs, whether that's Monday or later on down the road, he's going to have that calm. He's going to be there because he's been there and he's done that. And, he's somebody that's not going to be afraid of those big lights when they show up on the biggest stage in their game today. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. What is your confidence level in Aaron Rodgers right now as QB1 of the Pittsburgh Steelers heading into the postseason? Put it on a scale of 1 to 10 for me down there in the comment section. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. So in just a second here, I'm going to tell you about our sponsor today at Prize Picks. While I tell you about our sponsor today, give me a number between 1 to 10 on your confidence level of QB1. Now let's have a word from our sponsor today at Prize Picks, and it is officially the new year, guys. 2026 is officially here now, and in my opinion, this is the best time of the year to be a sports fan. Bowl games, playoff games, basketball and hockey season is now in full swing as well. It's all happening all at once, and while all that action is going on, there's one place where it feels so good to be right, and that's Prize Picks. Prize Picks is super simple to play. Just pick more than or less than and at least 2 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you could cash in. My favorite feature about Prize Picks is that how you play is up to you guys. If you want a little bit more flexibility, you can choose the flex play, or you can get paid even if one of your picks misses. And if you're feeling really strong about a particular lineup and want a bigger payout for getting everything right, you can go for the power play. No matter how you play, though, Prize Picks is a great way to put your takes to the test. Make some money, that is, if you know ball. This upcoming Monday for Wild Card Weekend here, I'm taking the less on passing yards for C.J. Stroud, the more on receptions for Kenneth Gainwell, and the more on receiving yards for Pat Freiermuth. You guys can download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS. Get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Another reason why I think Pittsburgh is dangerous in the AFC playoffs this year is that they can run the football. Now, I think that the Steelers, you can certainly say, need to run the football a little bit more because I believe they're still top 10 in passing percentage, and they are more efficient running the ball than they are passing the football. But listen, man, Kenny Gainwell and Jaylen Warren have been, the best thing about this Steelers offense all season long. The offensive line is playing well. You guys see the result for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. They're a top 10 rushing team in terms of the efficiency numbers and the metrics, EPA per rush and success rate, both in the top 10. And I think that this has to be a bread and butter for the Steelers offensively, especially if they're going to be playing in cold weather. We know they're going to be playing in a cold weather city this week against the Houston Texans in Pittsburgh. But even if they win, they're probably going to have to play Denver or New England once again in a cold weather situation. So I think that is something to keep in mind there, that if the Steelers need to run the football here in these playoffs, I think they're more than capable of it. In fact, they should make it a priority. But also, when they pass the football, guess what? DK Metcalf is back. And this is why I said the Ravens game and winning the Ravens game last week was going to be a tougher test. And I had less confidence in this team to beat the Ravens last week than I have in this team to beat the Texans this week. And, a big reason for that is DK Metcalf and the gravity of a guy like DK and the attention that he gets from opposing defenses opens things up for everybody else in this offense. And listen, man, when you've got a 3-man receiver rotation of Metcalf as the big body, yak threat, and deep threat, then you got Thielen as kind of the underneath, shifty route runner with good hands type of guy in the slot. And then you got Calvin Austin III, the shifty guy that can also beat you deep on double moves, etc. He's a good run after guy. That's a wide receiver trio I can get behind for a playoff run here, especially when you got a guy like Pat Freiermuth at receiving tight end there that has such an awesome connection with Aaron Rodgers. Like, the connection between him and Rodgers is just through the roof. I'm really excited to see what they can do these playoffs with Darnell Washington out of the lineup. And then also you got, supplementary pieces like Jonnu Smith and MVS, guys that can help you out in certain situations. So if you can keep these guys healthy, keep DK Metcalf healthy, this is a passing attack that can work, especially when you add Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell to this equation. And of course, Gainwell's your leading receiver this year in terms of total receptions, so he certainly will be a big part of the equation as well. But also, on the other side of the ball, the defense is playing extremely well right now, all right? Right now, they are, not giving up a lot of points. And, despite some, pretty shaky fourth quarters, and specifically the Lions and the Ravens game, over the last month, since week 15, since the Dolphins game here, this defense has only given up 19 points per game. By the way, if you're wondering, that would rank 5th for the entire season if they would have kept that number all year. But the fact that they're playing their best football, they're playing top 5 level football here down the stretch, especially in the first 3 quarters, man. They are shutting teams down in the first 3 quarters of ball games. If you can put together 4 quarters of good defense in the postseason, and this defense plays its best ball of the year right now, like they're primed to be, this Steelers defense can, finally be the type of group that we expected them to be all season long. Then also, the Steelers can win in both of the trenches, okay? And, this is why offensive linemen and defensive linemen are so valuable in the NFL draft every single year, is because trench play is king in the National Football League. Or maybe it's the queen to quarterback play, but, it's very important, okay? And the Steelers have invested a lot on their offensive and defensive lines. All 3 of the first-round picks in the Omar Khan era have been in the trenches, and they're really starting to gelling together, both of these groups, all right? Like the young offensive line, especially the right side of the offensive line, playing so well. Sayamalu's been playing great football at left guard, and Dylan Cook seems like he's a legit left tackle in this league. This is the best this Steelers offensive line has been in a long time, maybe the last decade, okay? And these guys are all super young except for Sayamalu. And then on defense, you've got probably the best edge trio in the league, Watt, Highsmith, and Herbig. And you've got a really good rotation of penetrative, disruptive players like Cam Hayward, Keanu Benson, Derek Harmon. You've got some good rotational pieces like Y.A. Black. And guys, if you can win the trenches on both sides of the ball the way the Steelers are capable of and the way they have over the last month or so, you have a chance to win versus any team you play, all right? Any team. I don't care who it is. And this is why the Steelers have been able to beat some of these teams that nobody thinks that they can beat, because people focus on, they don't have wide receivers or whatever, and the other team has all these star players at the skill positions. The Steelers can beat you the F up in the trenches, man. And when you can do that, you can beat any team in the league. It's one of the reasons why Denver has won as many games as they've won this year, is because they can beat you up on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. The Steelers can do that as well at this point in the year, and that makes them dangerous. Now, this one might piss some of the, Mike Tomlin, fire Mike Tomlin people out there, but he is a Super Bowl head coach. He's been there. He's done that. And I know some people will say, he inherited Bill Cowher's team and he didn't really earn that championship. But in my opinion, he absolutely earned that Super Bowl win. He took an 8-8 team the final year that Bill Cowher was there and immediately turned them into a double-digit win team and made the playoffs. Then the next year, he adds another 2 wins to that win total and wins the damn Super Bowl, okay? And, yes, did he inherit a future Hall of Fame quarterback in Big Ben Roethlisberger? Yes. Did he inherit Troy Polamalu? Yes. Did he inherit all these players that came over from the Cowher regime? Absolutely. But if you ask those players, if you ask Troy, if you ask, Big Ben, if you ask Santonio Holmes, did he earn that championship? Every single one of you, every single one of them will tell you Mike Tomlin was the leader in that locker room. I mean, like, if you watch the NFL films of chronicling that Super Bowl run, those players that were being interviewed for that documentary made it abundantly clear. Mike Tomlin put his stamp on the team immediately. He changed the culture in Pittsburgh immediately. So for him to get the most out of that group and then to also build the Killer B era, obviously it's disappointing. Didn't get a Super Bowl in that era, but you also had to deal with Tom Brady in the Patriots dynasty, and sometimes that's just the way the cookie crumbles in sports. But listen, man, I think Mike Tomlin is a future Hall of Famer. He's always going to be a Super Bowl champion. And, having a coach like that instills mental toughness in his teams the way that he does in those tight moments, man, along with the experienced veteran roster, I think that this is a Steelers team that's mentally tough. They've been through a lot this season. And I think that, when those tough moments and those tight moments get here, they're going to have the mental toughness to pull through and get those really tight victories. Now, before we get into my final reason why I think the Pittsburgh Steelers can go on a run in the AFC playoffs this year, click that thumbs up icon. If you are excited for the playoffs like I am, really do appreciate all of your guys' support. Every time you guys click that thumbs up icon, it tells the YouTube algorithm that you enjoy our content as a Steelers fan and that they should recommend our content to other Steelers fans. So if you guys want to help out the channel, get new eyes on our show, Make sure you guys click that thumbs up icon. I greatly appreciate it. My final reason why I believe the Pittsburgh Steelers can be dangerous in the AFC playoffs this year is that it's not a very good AFC playoff field this year. I mean, in years past, there's been gauntlets where you got Mahomes and you got Lamar and Josh Allen with a good defense at times. And, like these teams just seem like unbeatable. And then by the time the Steelers play them, usually on the road as a wild card, they just get absolutely walloped. But, like, that's just not the case this year. I mean, this week, you're going up against the Houston Texans team, a warm weather football team with a quarterback that's never won a football game where the temperature of the game would dip below 30 degrees. He's coming to a cold weather city. And they haven't played in a lot of cold weather games this year or just in general. And Pittsburgh's been playing in the cold for the last month, right? They played in the cold versus Miami on Monday Night Football. Then they played indoors in Detroit, but then the last 2 weeks in Cleveland and then again in Pittsburgh last week. They've been primed for this moment to play outside. Aaron Rodgers is one of the best cold weather quarterbacks in NFL history, going up against one of the worst cold weather quarterbacks in NFL history in C.J. Stroud. I break down the entire matchup with the Houston Texans, why I think the Steelers have a pretty decent chance of beating the Texans in our weekly preview. If you guys want to check that out, I'll put the link to that one in the comments and description and put the chip in the top right if you want to check that out. But, like, if you get past the Texans, which I think is possible, who else scares you in the AFC playoffs, man? Like, the Broncos, New England, Jacksonville is a brand new head coach and, an inexperienced playoff quarterback. The Bills don't have a defense. The Los Angeles Chargers don't have either of their starting tackles. Like, there's not a team that doesn't have its flaws in the AFC playoffs. And there's not a team, in my opinion, that the Pittsburgh Steelers cannot beat in a potential matchup here in the NFL postseason. And if you win versus Houston, you likely have to play either Denver or New England. Okay, Denver does not have a very good offense at all. Okay, that would be a matchup that I think would be very close in a defensive battle. And, that's why you get Aaron Rodgers to outperform the inexperienced Bo Nix in a playoff game on the road. And same thing with New England. The Steelers beat the Patriots earlier this year. I mean, like, obviously they had to force 4 fumbles and force 5 total turnovers to get the job done. But right now, the Steelers are better than they were at that early point in the season as well. And Drake May has barely played in the playoffs, all right? If things get close in that fourth quarter, give me Aaron Rodgers, especially because both of those places, cold weather environments, they won't have the advantage. It's not like the Steelers are a warm weather team going to those places and they got that advantage. The Steelers are a cold weather team too, man, and they've got one of the best cold weather quarterbacks to ever play. So, I'm not saying the Steelers would for sure beat those two teams. They're very good football clubs, well coached, all that stuff. And they can beat you up, especially Denver in the trenches. But, I wouldn't count them out. I will say that right now. I think they can easily win 2 games in this. Well, maybe not easily. They can win 2 games, though. That is what I'm trying to say here, guys. And I don't think that, you can sit here and say there's like a 0% chance that the Steelers can't string together a couple of wins. I mean, this week for sure, in my opinion, is a winnable game, even though the Texans are coming off of 9 wins. And then if you win, you have to play against either Denver or New England, against 2 inexperienced playoff quarterbacks. Like, yes, I think the Steelers have a chance in either one of those football games. And if you do that and you win these 2 games, you're in the AFC Championship, guys. And then, like I said, am I that scared of the Jaguars? Am I that scared of the Buffalo Bills? Am I that scared of Los Angeles in the AFC Championship game? Not really, all right? Like, I think that this Steelers team can absolutely, with everything that we've talked about today, with the experience on the roster and at the quarterback position, the way that they can beat you up in the trenches, all that different stuff, their head coach building a mentally tough culture in his locker room. I think that this Steelers team can make some noise here, guys. Obviously, that doesn't guarantee a playoff victory, but I certainly think it's possible and realistic, and I can't wait to see what this team can do over the next month or so. So predict it for me down there in the comment section. How many playoff games will the Pittsburgh Steelers win this season? Do they get 1, 2, 3, or 4, or 0? That's certainly a possibility as well. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. How many playoff games do the Pittsburgh Steelers win this year? By the way, if you answer 4, that means you think they win the Super Bowl this season. Now, now that's going to be the end of today's show, guys. I greatly appreciate your guys' support. If you are a real one, you made it to the end of today's show, and you're going to be with this team no matter what, no matter how far they go in this postseason, type those real ones down there in the comment section. I want to show some love to everybody that made it to the end of the show because, like clicking that thumbs up icon, it helps out the YouTube algorithm. So greatly appreciate your guys' support. Make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. Got some super chats to hit, and then we'll get out of here. Cole Neese with a 1. Appreciate you, Cole. Next one from Gary Frank, another 1. We appreciate you, Gary. Scotty with a 10. Big shout out to Scotty. And then another 10 here. So $20 from Scotty. Big shout out to you, my friend. Says we have 5 picks in the first 100. Around that list, the positions and potentially players you get. We can stack the wide receiver position or trade up for a top 3 receiver. I go wide receiver, nose tackle, safety, wide receiver, cornerback. Yeah, I don't mind any of that. I think that's a pretty decent plan. I think that all those things are positions that you need players at. Now, the thing that will make the wide receiver discussion interesting is, do they bring in a veteran in free agency or trade for one? Because if that happens, then maybe you don't have to spend 2 of your 5 picks in the top 100 on receivers. Now, you can always have depth, and that's always good. But yeah, like let's say they trade for Jordan Addison, or they bring in Romeo Doubs or Deebo Samuel or something like that as a veteran, then yeah, wide receiver in the first round is probably the way that I would go. And listen, man, if you want to go wide receiver again and really build the future of that position and stack it up, like absolutely, I'd rather have a stacked wide receiver room than a not stacked wide receiver room like we have this year. So. Don't hate that plan at all, Scotty. $5 from Steelers fan says, pick a legit wide receiver 2 in this year's draft, round 1. This offense would be dangerous. And listen, man, this is what I've been saying, Ponzi. Like, if you can get like a solid veteran via trade or free agency, and then you spend your first round pick on a stud at receiver, and there's a number of studs in this class. Like the Steelers can definitely get them a stud at 21 if that's where they're picking. This offense with a legit wide receiver trio, Darnell Washington and Pat Freiermuth at tight end, Kenny Gainwell and Jalen Warren at receiver, or at running back, I should say, and then maybe Aaron Rodgers coming back with a full offseason of reps with his guys, with a fully, fully, what's the word I'm looking for? Not ingratiated, but incorporated offense, with a lot of continuity heading into year 2. Like that could be a dangerous offense here in Pittsburgh, man. Like Aaron Rodgers has been okay this year. I'd say he's been, like an average to slightly below average starter this season. He's been pretty good, and he's been an upgrade at the position. But in year 2, he could take this to an even higher level, not only because of the continuity thing, but also because of the increased talent at wide receiver. Like if we have a legit wide receiver trio in Pittsburgh next year, watch out, man. Watch out. That's all I got to say. 2 from Corey says, stop draw plays. They don't work. Toss/zone only, please. I mean, yeah, you could run some power stuff. I honestly think the Steelers run power pretty well, where they pull guards sometimes and they run trap or, whatever. And sometimes that works. But yeah, man, like draw plays, whatever, and the tosses have actually worked pretty well, for the most part. When they're not 4th and 1 or whatever at the 1 yard with 2 seconds left before the half, and you're tossing it to the weak side. Yeah, $1 from Mark. Appreciate you with a little diamond on there, and that's it. Great. All right. Marco is saying, keep Thielen. I don't think he's coming back. I think he's pretty much said one of the reasons why he wanted out of Minnesota is because he wanted one last chance to compete for a Super Bowl, and he's getting that here in Pittsburgh. Yeah, I mean, he was with Carolina, and he wanted out of Carolina because they weren't really expected to be like a playoff team, and of course the Bucs shit the bed. So, okay, that's going to be it for the Super Chats today, guys. I really appreciate your support. We'll be back again on Thursday with probably 4 segments, including a mailbag on the show here, because obviously we don't have a watch party on Sunday, so we got to get some content for you guys for Sunday. It's going to be a really fun show, so make sure you guys join us probably around the same time, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe around 6 p.m. Eastern instead of 6:30 like we had to today. We had to make some adjustments because of the Harbaugh news, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the rest of the week kind of plays out with the storylines, all this different stuff. Trent Brown is going to be an injury for Houston to keep your eye on. But yeah, we'll keep you guys updated with the very latest surrounding the Pittsburgh Steelers all week. We'll see you guys on Thursday. And until then, here we go, Steelers.